you blink, you miss it. That's why a lot of people are really happy with the quickie, cheapy guys, because they don't really look that close, but not everybody's satisfied with that. And for those who are not, that's what we're here for, because it can be done a lot better. And the other thing is this. You see that? A client had asked me to look at some subpar dent work on her BMW. Could we make it better? While I had no problem trying to help my client out, I was a little hesitant making a video like this. I didn't want to come off as self-righteous or accusatory. I also didn't want to potentially invest time and energy into a negative subject. You know, condemning somebody else's shoddy work. Look, I get it. Nobody's perfect, but this work can be done better. A lot better. So what we have here is a classic case of low price, low quality. My client reached out after buying the car used and noticed something weird going on near the door handle. So immediately she called me to inspect. Turns out the previous owner had hired a low-price paintless dent repair technician to remove a small, approximately 2-inch dent. Now first of all, it's important to point out that upon inspection it was very clear that this, although poor example of workmanship, was not performed by some parking lot degenerate, but rather a so-called paintless dent removal professional. One who comes equipped with a power drill, rubber plugs, and of course, dent removal tools. The technician also knew how much he could rough out the metal just well enough to make it less obvious without actually cracking the paint. Of course, I may be given more credit than he deserves because after all, he did mindlessly decide to buzz a nasty little opening right along the inner edge of the door. And by mindlessly, I mean he could have instead chosen one of 3 alternative options to remove the dent without ever even having to drill a hole. Alternative number 1 would have been to remove this dent uninvasively with the glue pull method. With careful technique and the proper equipment, we would have never even had to touch the backside of this panel. Option number 2 would have been to go down through the window channel, which I'll demonstrate in just a minute. This option also requires technique and mindfulness in order to protect the glass and the door's components, while carefully applying pressure to the inside of the dent. And lastly, alternative number 3 would have been to access through the adjacent factory-placed opening by removing the original rubber plug. I listed this as the last option because although it would surely allow one to get behind the dent, the angle presented the risk of scratching the painted surface of the door jamb, as well as misshaping the hole. This would not make for an optimal solution, nor for a flawless repair. Not that our carefree technician friend was even concerned about that. Now, enough about him and his mindlessness. Let's see how we're going to fix this thing. Our goal today is to improve the rough appearance of the bad dent work as best as possible. Then we're going to clean up the bad hole drill by deburring and straightening the non-factory opening, followed by coating the exposed metal with a rust-inhibiting agent. And lastly, we'll properly cap the hole with a new plug. Now arguably, conventional paint and body methods to patch and refinish the door jamb are still a worthy option that my client may utilize later on. In the meantime, we'll ensure that the metal is sealed and protected. So getting started, I first carefully check for access down the window. Now technically I could have used the hole that the other technician made, but I chose to do it this way to prove there is indeed a better way. I ruled out the glue pull method because the metal was just too overworked to be as effective. Now it's time to meticulously flatten out all of the little high spots using my knockdown tool. In the process, I am essentially recreating the dent. Because of the sharp high spots, my tap down work is extensive and will mar the finish slightly. We'll correct that in just a bit. Now it's time to start bringing up the lows, or pushing as we call it. I do this methodically using a thin tool called a whale tail. With this tool, I can carefully slide it between a structural brace and the dent and gently twist the handle, effectively moving metal back into place while applying mild heat to the surface. The heat helps to soften the metal. The softer the metal, the less pushing required. This is better for the car and my wrist. I'll go ahead and repeat both of these steps until the metal is as flat as possible. Okay, we're pretty flat now. If you look really close, you can see a little bit of texture. This is why it's so important to start the repair with clean and methodical even pressure, not the bad hurried pushes that the other technician made. Although it is improved now, and it will hold its shape, the metal here is ultimately overworked. Now it's time for some paint correction, where I will be performing what we call a damp sand and some polishing. This process will help to smooth out any of the remaining high spots created by the other technicians' poorly executed metal pushes, as well as any of the mars or blemishes put in by my extensive tap-down work. And finally, let's see how we can clean up the edges of that bad hole drill so that the plug will fit nice and flush. So I'll start cleaning up the edge by using a rat tail file. But since the hole was drilled so close to the edge, there's not a whole lot of room. But twisting the tool side to side definitely helps. Next, using a pair of needle nose pliers, I'll gently clip the sharp edges, or burrs, off of the access point, being careful not to scratch the factory finish of the door jamb. Now I'm going to spray cavity wax into the opening to coat the scratches put in by the other technician. This will help to protect the inside of the door from moisture and rust. Now, after degreasing the raw edge of the hole, I go ahead and carefully apply some zinc galvanizing compound. Again, this will inhibit rust from forming. And finally, it's time to seal the deal with a new rubber plug. And that's it. Now let's take a look. Is it perfect? No. Is it closer to factory spec? Absolutely. Was my client happy with the result? Definitely. Truthfully, this was a pretty benign case of bad paintless dent repair. Often, the shoddy PDR attempts that people occasionally bring to me are so beyond repair they can only be corrected with conventional body and paint work. In other words, they require repaint. So how much does it cost for a repair like this? To clean up someone else's poor workmanship? Well, let's break it down. Using our estimation app, we know the damage spanned 2 inches. And as we scroll down, we're going to click Rework Poor Previous PDR. And lastly, the dent is located right over a reinforcement brace, so we click the Obstructed Damage button. The understanding of all of these variables is what produces a factory spec repair. This bad PDR correction cost $463.50. Now, what if the owner of the car had called us first to remove that 2-inch dent from their door? What would it have run? Well, first of all, there'd be no reworking of bad PDR. And best of all, no holes needed to be drilled either, because this dent would have been a great candidate for the glue pull method. And we deduct the obstruction charge, since we wouldn't even need to access behind the panel, because we'd be using the glue pull method. It's uninvasive. Had they called us first, it would have cost $257.50. Unfortunately, in our industry, anyone, and I mean anyone, who says that they can fix a dent can call themselves a so-called professional dent repair tech. So it's important to choose wisely. If this video can serve to help you in your research of finding a legitimate paintless dent removal service, as well as avoiding a bad dent repair experience, then I've done my job. And I really hope it helps to clarify the process of paintless dent removal, as well as dispel any myths or doubts about it. And should you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. You can find us at dentevo.com. Thanks for watching.